Hey guys, Darren Miles with Darren Miles Photography, and I'm based here in beautiful, not so sunny, overcast and rainy today. It is the rainy season here in June in Southwest Florida, so we have to put up with rain sometimes. So it's a wonderful opportunity, since most of my job's canceled today, to review something that I haven't reviewed in a long time. And that is, this is a Micro Four Thirds lens. Yes, it's a Micro Four Thirds lens. The first one I've reviewed in probably about a year. I'm actually kind of excited about this one, and if you're curious to know what it is, stick around and find out. Okay, it's time for me to come clean. Over the last 8 to 12 months, you probably noticed that I've been doing fewer and fewer Micro Four Thirds reviews. When I first started my YouTube channel, I was probably 80% Micro Four Thirds. I loved Olympus, I loved the Micro Four Thirds system, really small, really compact, really capable, yada, yada, yada. But as time wore on, as many of you know, Sony has introduced some really great hybrid cameras, specifically the A7 Mark III series. Both the A7R Mark III and the A7 Mark III have been incredible, or are incredible, hybrid cameras that do both video and stills extraordinarily well. So as a result of that, and the direction of that my business has been taking, which is definitely more into hybrid shooting, if you've been paying attention to my channel, you know that I've been doing way more real estate videos. And I found that the Sony does a great job of doing both, especially the A7 Mark III, because with a 24 megapixel sensor, the pictures are great and they're not going to crush my hard drives. And I do a lot of outsourcing of my imagery as well. So when I send those big files to my crew to do the post-processing or some of the editing, it's a much less arduous process to send them on an FTP. I mean, one file is like 30 megabytes, instead of one file of the A7R Mark III is like 75, 80 megabytes, which is just crazy stupid for one file. Over the last couple of years, there have been a couple of lenses that have really piqued my interest with Micro Four Thirds, and this is one of them. This is the Panasonic f2.8 to f4 8 to 18 millimeter lens for Micro Four Thirds. And I have to say, piqued my interest, and I finally had B&H send me a copy of it, because even though I've been doing more migration into hybrid shooting, the GH5 has one really neat party trick, and that is it can shoot 4K at 60 frames per second in camera, kind of a big deal. It's also a really portable setup, so this lens and this camera, this combination fits on virtually any handheld gimbal device that's available on the marketplace today, making things very neat, portable, and productive. I can get in and up and shooting in no time in just about any property with this combination. So I really like that a lot. So I've had this lens now for the past 3 weeks, and I've taken a slew of pictures and a couple of real estate videos with it. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to give it a full-blown and proper review. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Hey guys, before we get to the video, go ahead and surf on over to www.darrenmiles.com and click on the Education tab. And there you will learn all about Camp Miles real estate photography for the real world. This is a course that teaches you how to break into the real estate photography business. It'll show you the ropes, it'll show you some post-processing to get you going with real estate photography. And then you can take those skills and then start or add to your offerings as far as your photography business is concerned. These days, you probably know being a portrait photographer or a wedding photographer is a very, very competitive place to be. I'm not saying real estate photography isn't a competitive place, but it's a nice offering to add to your list of offerings. And what Camp Miles does, it'll teach you those basics and help you break into the real estate photography business. What gear to buy, where to warehouse your tours, how to get clients, really the basic important stuff that you need to learn how to break into real estate photography as a career. And until May 31st of 2019, if you use the code Darren, D-A-R-R-E-N, you can save yourself 50 bucks, meaning the course will only cost you $99. It's a really inexpensive way to break into the real estate photography business. So with that out of the way, go ahead and enjoy the video. Thanks. First up is the build, and I'll just start by saying that it's impressive. Panasonic leaves little doubt that this is in fact a premium offering. It's made out of metal and comes in at a solid but not too hefty 11.1 ounces or 315 grams. And it's also dust and moisture resistant, which is also known as weather sealing. Yes. On the inside, it's a fairly complex formula of 15 elements arranged in 10 groups, and included in that formula are 1 aspherical ED element, 3 aspherical elements, 2 extra low dispersion elements, and 1 ultra high refractive index element, which all combine to suppress color fringing, chromatic aberrations, and spherical aberrations for high clarity, sharpness, and color accuracy. Panasonic has also applied a nano surface coating to individual elements to control lens flare and ghosting for improved contrast and color fidelity when working in strong lighting conditions. So says Panasonic. Now the aperture ranges from f2.8 to f22, and speaking of the aperture, there are 7 rounded aperture blades for smooth, autofocus bokeh rendering, but as I've mentioned probably a zillion times in other wide-angle lens reviews, generally speaking, we typically don't buy a wide-angle lens for their dazzling bokeh abilities, as we're usually trying to render the whole scene in focus. But we'll cover that in the optics section of the review. The focus and zoom rings are both just silky smooth with the perfect amount of resistance. These things just ooze quality. The front filter thread is 67 millimeters. What that means is, unlike many other lenses in this category, we can utilize standard screw-on filters because the front element isn't so bulbous. The bottom line here is build, frankly, just doesn't get much better than this, which means the 8-18 gets a perfect 10 out of 10 for build quality. Next up is autofocus speed and accuracy. Now this is the first time that I've ever seen this because Panasonic describes the AF motor as fast 240 frames per second autofocus drive. I'm not completely 100% sure that I understand what that means, but what I can tell you in practice is that it's blazingly fast and mostly accurate. I'll explain the mostly part here in just a bit. Now, in order for me to get a handle on the AF capability of a lens, I have to use it for a while in a variety of lighting situations. And though I've been using the 8-18 for video, I've also been using it for my still imagery. And what I can tell you is that in my experience, the AF has been mostly positive. In pictures, I'm usually shooting at about f5.6, which is about f11 in terms of depth of field on a full frame camera. And that's a lot of depth of field, or area of the scene that's in focus. And that said, I'm surprised that even with all that depth of field, how many times I ended up with a shot that was out of focus. I do a lot of shooting, and I also do a lot of outsourcing of my post-processing. I'm usually sorting the images as thumbnails, meaning that I'm not always looking at the full-sized image. And given all that depth of field that we have in Micro Four Thirds, I wasn't even thinking that a shot would even be noticeably out of focus with that much depth of field. Well, in the first week, I had about 6 or 7 shots over 5 properties that ended up being out of focus. I was kind of surprised, as it created a lot of rework, but it also forced me to take more care when focusing my shots with the 8-18. Now, let me just demo this really quickly. I'm going to focus on something close. And by the way, the minimum focus distance is just about 9 inches or 23 centimeters. So here we go, something close. That's really fast. Now something far away. Yeah, I mean, I think you can see that the AF speed is fast, silent, and again, mostly accurate. Though again, I'm really kind of surprised at how many shots were out of focus at f5.6. Now just be aware that if you're shooting static subjects, just double check the autofocus. And by the way, for video shooting, what I usually do is I do a single shot AF to lock my focus down, then I don't adjust it again. Given again how much depth of field do we have at f5.6 or Micro Four Thirds, everything's generally in sharp focus. But the bottom line is, for AF speed and accuracy, the 8-18 gets an 8.5 out of 10. So next up is optical quality and the quality of the results. Now we already know that it's a physical specimen with decent autofocus, but how are the optics? Well, in a word, they're impressive. Very, very impressive. When I shoot real estate images on Micro Four Thirds, I'm often set at f5.6, which gives me plenty of depth of field. In video, I'll shoot anywhere from f2.8 to f4 to let in more light when the light gets low, and here again, the results are very impressive. Micro Four Thirds cameras do a lot of lens profile corrections in camera. From what I can tell, I'm not seeing a whole lot of distortion, as the vertical lines look great and really straight. I'm also not seeing a lot of chromatic aberrations either. However, as with all my reviews, rather than me talking about how great it is, go ahead and see for yourself. The next 2 to 3 minutes will be a series of stills and video clips taken with the Panasonic Lumix 8-18mm, and if you shoot real estate videos and stills, I don't think you can go wrong with this lens. Last up is value, and what we have here is a premium wide-angle lens for the Micro Four Thirds system. Just a few short years ago, Micro Four Thirds had a dearth of options when it came to wide-angle lenses, but today we have a whole bunch to choose from. Notably from Olympus and Panasonic. They both have 7 to 14 millimeter options, the Olympus being the f2.8 and the Panasonic being the f4. There's also the Laowa 7.5 millimeter f2, a tremendous value if you can live with manual focus, and the lightweight version doubles as an aerial lens if you have a DJI-inspired drone with an X5 gimbal. But back to the Panasonic. More often than not, I like to shoot as wide as possible, and I found that 8 to 16 millimeters equivalents, or rather 8 millimeter, 16 millimeter equivalents, I sometimes had some issues fitting small rooms into the whole scene, and I found myself wishing that the lens just went a little bit wider. At a list price approaching $1,100, the Panasonic is definitely on the higher end of wide-angle lenses from a pricing standpoint, but it's right at the top optically. However, given the choice of wide-angle lenses available for Micro Four Thirds today, it's likely, speaking for myself, that I would pay just a little bit extra and get the Olympus 7 to 14 Pro over the Panasonic 8 to 18, though I really honestly don't believe you can go wrong with either. Now, I know you lose some versatility on the long end, but I found that in real estate photography and videography, my needs are greater on the wider end of the focal range. Yes, it's only 1 millimeter difference, but on the wide end, 1 millimeter can make a big difference, again, in wide-angle shooting. The bottom line is the 8 to 18 is a great lens, and depending on your specific needs, it's probably a fantastic option. But for the way that I need to shoot, I need something just a wee bit wider, just often enough to matter. If you don't need 7 millimeters on the wide end or 14 millimeters equivalent, then let there be no doubt the Panasonic 8 to 18 is a great lens and definitely worth your money. But for me, I need the extra millimeter. So for value, the Panasonic 8 to 18 gets a 9 out of 10. To wrap up this review, we gave the Panasonic Lumix 8 to 18 millimeter f2.8 to f4 lens a 47.5 out of 50 and our highly recommended rating, just 0.5 points short of our coveted Editor's Choice Award. The final word, as if we need more proof that we're living in the golden age of photography, when differences between lenses literally come down to splitting hairs for one over the other. And so it goes with the Panasonic 8 to 18 millimeter lens. As great as it is, I found myself longing for something just a little bit wider. Incredibly capable at 16 millimeters equivalent, I've been spoiled by the Nikon 14 to 24 millimeter f2.8, which I'm very used to shooting at 14 millimeters. Real estate video, on the other hand, I found that the 8 to 18 does a fantastic job, and it only weighs about 2/3 the weight of the Olympus 7 to 14 millimeter f2.8 Pro. I think I prefer the Olympus overall, but I really like the portability and small form factor of the 8 to 18. In the end, it's a great time to be a wide-angle shooter on Micro Four Thirds, as the choices for high-quality wide-angle lenses today are many, and the 8 to 18 definitely approaches the top of the list. I'm Darren Miles with Darren Miles Photography, based here in beautiful, and now it is sunny, Southwest Florida. If you like videos like this, go ahead and give me a like, or better yet, subscribe. And until the next time, happy shooting.